to order the May 8th, 2020 Board of Administration for SDCERS meeting. And first thing we need to do is call roll. So I would like to ask Ms. Cynthia Joyner to call the roll.
Okay, Ms. Broad,
Here.
Ms. Coleman,
Present.
Mr. Battaglia,
Here.
Mr. Hallquist,
Present.
Mr. Kenny,
I'm here.
Mr. Maggi,
I'm here.
Mr. McBride,
Present.
Mr. Provolos,
I'm here.
Ms. Spoon,
Present.
Mr. Udris,
Here.
Mr. Wallace,
Here.
Mr. Shearson,
Here.
Mr. Kaufman.
Present.
Okay. We're all in,
Okay, everybody's here.
everyone.
Everyone. So before we get started, I just want to make some opening comments because this meeting's a little different. First of all, I'd really like to thank the staff for doing a great job organizing this meeting so that we can do it kind of efficiently and telephonically. We've limited the meeting to necessary action items that need very much to be addressed today, and postponed a few things that can wait a little bit, and hopefully we can do at a time when we have a more sort of robust meeting environment. So thank you to the staff for that. So today, as you know, we didn't have committees yesterday, so I will be handling all the action items as opposed to having them reported out by committees. And all action items, therefore, will need a motion and a second. Ms. Cynthia Joyner will be calling the roll for votes. And then if you would like to speak or comment after the presentation of a item, please state your name and wait to be recognized by myself. And in some cases, we may have a queue. So with that as sort of the rules of the road for today, let's proceed. And I'd like to ask Cynthia Joyner if we have any public comment requests.
We have no public comment requests.
Okay, thank you very much. So next we'll move to the approval of consent agenda items. And I'd like to ask for a motion from the board.
Moved by Thanasi.
And a second.
Second by Charlie.
Oh, wait, let me see, moved by.
Okay, we have a motion from Tanasi and a second from Charlie. And Cynthia, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Broad,
Yes.
Ms. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia,
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist,
Aye.
Mr. Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Maggi,
Yes.
Mr. McBride,
Yes.
Mr. Provolos,
Yes.
Ms. Spoon,
Yes.
Mr. Udris,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Mr. Shearson,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
and the motion passes 13-0.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move to business operations. We have one action item, which is the election of board president. And in this matter, I'd like to recognize Greg Rademacher.
Thank you, Carol. Good morning, everyone. Before the board is an action item for election of board president. The board's policy titled Board Process on Election of Board President and Appointment of Vice President provides a member of the board may serve as your president for 2 consecutive one-year terms. Our current board president, Carol Broad, is finishing her first-year term and is eligible to serve the board for a second-year term as our board president. I will say that Carol has served with distinction during her first term and is willing to continue her service as board president for a second term. If it is the board's desire to have Carol continue as board president, now would be the time to have a motion and a second for her election. Thank you.
I so move.
Who
George
second by
Key
Coleman.
makes the second.
who made the first?
I think I heard
Tanasi
Tanasi
moved.
first.
So,
Second?
So who's my first again?
Tanasi.
Okay, Thanasi. And the second?
Kenny.
Okay. And we are ready to vote. Ms. Broad?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia?
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist?
Aye.
Mr. Kenny?
Aye.
Mr. Maji?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mr. Provolos?
Yes.
Ms. Spoon?
Yes.
Mr. Udris?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Shearson?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
And the motion passes 13-0.
Congratulations, Carol.
Well, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate your votes and your support, and I'm honored to serve as president for another year. I'm particularly excited about working with this distinguished board and excellent staff to continue to meet the objectives of our organization. So thank you very much. And next, we're going to move to disability. We have one action item to approve the non-industrial disability retirement application of Richie Katapia, and I'd like to recognize Sandra Clausen.
Good morning. This is a recommendation to approve the non-industrial disability retirement application of Richie Katapia. Mr. Katapia was diagnosed with cancer in 2018. He filed an application for non-industrial disability retirement on January 24th of 2020 and passed away on the 28th. If the board approves the disability retirement application, Mr. Katapia's surviving spouse will receive a continuance of the disability retirement benefit. Staff recommends that the board approve the application.
Thank you, Sandra. Can I have a motion, please? Second from someone?
Second by Spoon.
Who's the second? Okay, Ms. Spoon.
Bobby Spoon.
Okay. And we are ready to vote.
And this is Tom. I wanted just to ask a clarifying question. The surviving spouse is my supervisor, so do I need to abstain or can I still vote?
Tom, this is
I guess it would depend on what your vote is.
This is Johnny Tran. Unless you believe it causes a personal bias conflict such that you can't vote on the merits, I urge you to vote.
Thank you.
Okay, and we are ready to vote. Ms. Broad?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia?
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist?
Aye.
Mr. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Maji?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Mr. Provolos?
Yes.
Ms. Spoon?
Yes.
Mr. Udris?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Shearson?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
All votes are in, and the motion passes 13-0.
Thank you. We'll now move on to business and governance. We have one action item, the annual cost of living adjustment for July 1st, 2020, and I'd like to recognize Marcel Rossman to discuss this matter.
Good morning. So before you is the annual cost of living adjustment proposal. Each year we have Chiron calculate what the COLA increase should be both for our regular retirees and for our retirees that are part of the 1981 plan. If the board approves this, this is the COLA that would go in effect July 1 for the July 31st pension payments, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I don't hear any questions at this time.
This is George.
Oh.
This is George. I have a
Okay.
question.
Go ahead, George.
Yes. Is this required by contract that they would automatically receive the COLA increase, or is it discretionary with us?
It is actually in the San Diego Municipal Code and in the plan documents for the port and the airport. So it is not discretionary on SDCERS part. What we have to determine is the amount of the COLA, but it is actually in the plan documents.
Okay, so we're not voting whether or not they get a COLA. We're just voting on the amount.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Moved by Thanasi
Any
Priolas.
further? Okay, thank you. A second, please.
Charlie. Second.
Charlie, second?
Yes.
Okay. And
Roll call.
we are ready to vote. Ms. Broad?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia?
Yes.
Mr. Hawquist?
Aye.
Mr. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Maggi?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Mr. Provolos?
Yes.
Ms. Spoon?
Yes.
Mr. Udries?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Shearson?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
All votes are in, and the motion passes 13-0.
Great, thank you. Before we move on, I just want to point out under reports, there's an excellent administrative operations report by Greg providing detail on how operations have been managed during this unusual time, and I'm sure you've all read it and absorbed it, and Greg's going to have some comments later on in the comment section of the meeting. So next, we are going to move to investment, and we have one action item, which is staff and consultant recommendation to ratify the termination of the Allianz Structured Alpha U.S. Equity 500 strategy, and I'd like to recognize Liza Crisafi.
Good morning. I'm going to be making some high-level comments with regards to this item, and then I will turn it over to Steve Voss, who will provide some additional color into the rationale for the sell recommendation. The board followed SDCERS' practices and policies in the hiring of Allianz's Structured Alpha U.S. Equity 500 strategy by working with the consultant to review the appropriateness and the fit within SDCERS' portfolio. This strategy had had a long and successful track record dating back to August of 2008. When the strategy was brought to the board in September of 2016, it had generated an annualized net return of 11.6% versus the benchmark, which was the S&P 500, of 8.9%. This strategy was heavily due diligenced by Aon, and staff had begun looking at this strategy as far back as August of 2011. Structured Alpha had been a good performer in SDCERS' portfolio, generating an annualized return from inception through December 31st of 2019 of a net positive return of 19.9% versus its benchmark of 16.5%. When the market started to fall in February and accelerated in March, dropping an unprecedented 30% in 22 days, staff and Aon began reaching out to Allianz to see how the performance of the strategy was holding up. By the end of March, the performance of the strategy had declined 75% versus the benchmark at a negative 19.6%. This performance far exceeded our risk profile expectations. After numerous discussions, staff and Aon believed it was in the fund's best interest to terminate the strategy immediately, as allowed for in the investment policy statement. And now I'd like to turn it over to Steve, who will have some additional remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Liza, and hopefully my audio is okay. You all can hear me fine?
Yes.
Yep, I think it's good.
Great. Thank you very much. So just some additional context here. The portfolio, the Allianz Structured Alpha portfolio, was valued at about $282 million at the end of December 31st, 2019. It was 3.1% of the total fund, and just as a reminder, it played a role within the U.S. equity portion of the program. And as Liza mentioned, we started regular contact, as did staff, right around the end of February. That's when the S&P started to decline dramatically. That's when we started to see economic worries and financial market worries about COVID-19 and the impact that was having. The S&P during that time, as Liza mentioned, declined significantly. We began regular contact with the manager on February 24th. And we soon thereafter put them, quote, under review. And what does that mean? When we put a manager under review, it means we want to reevaluate the merits of the investment strategy. We want to look at the merits of their investment process. We want to look at risk controls and a number of other factors. We basically seek to reevaluate the manager. During that time, Allianz became less than forthcoming with information in dealing with us. In fact, they had effectively ceased to communicate with us in an effective way on March 15th. And we continued to do work, piece together what we could during the time that we had, and then ultimately came out with a termination recommendation on the 27th of March. We communicated that to Liza and the team, held a call with the chair of the investment committee and the chair of the board, in addition to Johnny Tran and Greg, and made the recommendation to terminate the manager. The reasons for the termination, one, part and parcel, is just the lack of communication. We did not have access to much of the information that we needed to be able to look at the portfolio and evaluate what it was doing and why it was operating the way that it was. What we were able to piece together with the information that we did have was basically two very critical things. One, kind of a systematic breakdown. Number one was a systematic breakdown in their investment process. Their hedges in place to protect the portfolio during periods of market volatility, as we have experienced throughout the history of this program, simply did not work. And number two, there's a failure of risk management. And what struck us most profoundly was the lack of any independent risk assessment or risk controls put into place, which we had understood to be a kind of a cornerstone of the investment strategy. So based on those reasons and lack of comfort with the answers that we were getting, we recommended on the 27th of March termination of the manager. And that was a across-the-board recommendation to other clients, other Aon clients that use the Allianz Structured Alpha portfolio. Since that point in time, your investment team put in notice with the manager that termination would be forthcoming. The assets have been wound down, and we do expect that SDCERS will receive assets back on, I believe it's Monday of next week, Monday or Tuesday of next week. Those assets will be parked within a passive structure within at the S&P 500, so that we will continue to get the necessary market exposure that we need. And then in the weeks and months ahead, staff and consultant will work on figuring out how to reportion those assets within the program to gain effective exposure. Expect to hear more about that at the July Investment Committee meeting. I will stop there and entertain any questions that you might have.
This is Thanasi Frioblos. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Steve, and I don't want this to sound as an attack at all, but I have some questions that concern me. If I understood you correctly, end of March, I'm going to assume that's the 30th or the 31st, you guys had some concerns. You're reaching out to management, and if I understood your comments properly, they had ceased to communicate with you between March and the time that you issued your flash statement on March 16th. So if I understand, it's 2.5 weeks of non-communication, and the result on the 16th was, hey, it's under review. So there's a couple of questions. The first one is, why did it take 2.5 weeks of no communication to just simply recommend it was under review, and then take another almost 11 days to actually tell us, hey, let's get out of this thing? I'm sure there's more to it, but I just want to understand that, because those dates concern me when a manager is not communicating with us. That's just to me, that's a huge, huge problem. The second issue is I'd like to have some understanding. If the portfolio was at 285, what do we expect to get back on Monday? And then lastly, what I'm concerned about is that you've identified there was a lack of controls and a lack of independent review. How is it that we missed that before, and why did that become an issue during the crisis? Like, it seems to me that we should have identified those things before the crisis. So again, I'm not suggesting anybody didn't do their job, but as our consultant who we pay to get in there and make sure that we don't have these issues, I'm trying to understand those three topics.
Yeah, thank you for that. They're important topics. Let me first talk about the timeline. And Thanasi, if I skip an element of one of your questions, I'll pause and feel free to reiterate. I want to make sure that I get it right. First, on the timeline. So markets basically peaked around February 20th, and then it was around the 24th when things started to decline. Not rapidly at first, but just started to decline. That's when we first started our communications with the manager, was on the 24th, just checking in with them, asking them how things were going, how the portfolio was structured, and what types of trades they were putting into place to protect the portfolio. We had a good dialogue during that period of time. And it was then, let me again look at my notes, under review, the under review recommendation was sent to Liza and team on the 16th. It was at that point in time that we had observed the portfolio had declined by roughly 22%, and we were concerned. So we continued our dialogue with the manager. Well, we sought to continue our dialogue with the manager. We were not able to get any more information. The time period from that, the 16th to the 27th, we wanted to piece together as much information that we had already collected, information that we had from the manager previously, and just our understanding of the manager. We were operating under a timeline. This is a really important note. And the timeline is when clients need to notify the manager of their desire to terminate and to redeem assets. That date is April 7th. And so there was no other additional information we could have done anything with up until April 7th. And so we did not feel that we needed to rush anything at that point in time, and that's why we took the time between the 16th and the 27th. The comment on risk controls, that's a little bit harder for us to understand. There were things that simply weren't implemented that we had understand were key controls and components of their investment program, such as their independent risk assessment and risk review of their investment portfolio. And in our analysis and understanding of the manager and the strategy, that those systems and those protocols had been operating previously just fine. And it is unclear to us why that didn't operate, or why they didn't operate as effectively during this time period. There's actually a fair amount of information that we need to receive or obtain from the manager on a go-forward basis. And we've actually hired an external law firm to help us with the assessment and collection of some of that information. And I've communicated that to your team, to Johnny Tran and Liza and Greg, and we'll keep them apprised as to what we learn when we get information. We'll share what we can with you when we get it. In terms of assets back next week, the expectation, as I have seen as early as this morning, is roughly $76 million $76 to $77 million or so. So that is an aggregate loss of about 72 or 73% of original corpus at the beginning of the year.
If I can just ask a couple of follow-up questions on that, I get not to invoke Ronald Reagan, but trust but verify kind of comes to mind. If we think they're doing something, do we not receive copies of those independent reports from those independent reviewers? Do we not ask for that? Is it something that they just chose not to give us, or was that just not part of the protocol of what you guys asked for on our behalf?
No, historically they've been very open. And I should probably they went into what I would describe of a risk management mode when the portfolio fell as much as it did, and that's why they ceased dialogue with us. Historically, we've had very strong connection with this investment manager, had access to all the information that we've ever needed, access to trade information, access to internal reports, internal analysis, including their own risk reports and their own risk analysis. We've done our own. Aon has done its own independent risk analysis of this portfolio, stress testing the portfolio. And we had, as recently as, I forget the exact date, but it was November of 2019, done a complete re-underwriting of the investment manager that culminated in a lengthy report and a lengthy continued buy rate recommendation of the manager. So everything that has happened starting in late February is outside of the realm of expectations, the realm of the analysis that we've done on them, and outside of their own analysis that they shared with us, shared with your investment team, and as it's presented in their marketing materials. So there's more work that we need to do to truly understand the nature of these failures, and we're starting that. We have been starting that process, and we'll continue to keep you updated as the best of our abilities.
Are we likely to receive a report on that? What's the deliverable that SDCERS can expect from you as to your investigation, your analysis, where the breakdowns were, what Aon could have done better, what the manager could have done better? When do we expect to see that, or do we expect to see that?
You should expect to see that. It's hard to say right now because these things will likely unfold in a fairly slow process. There are lawyers involved, obviously, on all sides, and so it's likely going to take some time for us to get the type of information that we need and that we want. But we'll go through the process that we need and share all of that information with you all and our other clients that use the fund when we have it.
Okay, so I guess the last question I have, and I apologize for monopolizing things, but when you said you had access to everything that you ever had needed, just so I understand, did they actively turn that access off at some point in time?
They stopped communicating with us. So yes, they stopped communicating with us on March 15th. And
so we never had independent access. You guys just had access through the manager. They would give you whatever you wanted, but you had to specifically ask for it. It wasn't just you could go on and pull data or take a download or something of that nature. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Is that something that can be changed in the future so that you can get it directly?
It depends on the nature of the investment that you have. So this is the nature of the structure. These assets weren't traded on. They were not traded on your custodial account like a traditional long-only investment would be. They were traded on a prime brokerage account through Allianz.
Steve, thank you.
You bet. Good question.
Okay, do we have, thank you, Steve and Tanasi. Are there other questions? Say your name.
Yes, this is George.
Karina.
Yeah,
Okay, can I get a list in? I heard Karina, I heard George.
Cliff Shearson.
Cliff, anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Karina.
Thank you, Carol. Steve, is it your understanding that this strategy was levered and short volatility, and when volatility spiked, that's what caused the portfolio value to fall so precipitously, and also was the breakdown in the risk management a result of breakdown in correlations across asset classes? I know at a time it was hard to price off-the-run treasuries and hard to price risk assets in general, and it was basically a broad-based sell-off with perhaps the exception of long treasuries, gold. Can you comment specifically on, the investment side of things? What exactly happened here?
I don't have enough information to be able to give you a decent answer to that question. Those are some of the things that we need to continue to see. We do know that they simply were not positioned properly. They could not offset their short put options in the portfolio. And we do know that they were not able to put hedges in place effectively, in part because of, and I think this is part of your second part of your question, because of market conditions in general. The level of volatility, the pricing of hedges was just prohibitively expensive.
Thank you.
Okay, George.
Yes. It's unfortunate that I just really hate to sell when things are down so much. But I understand if you lost faith in them, that's a totally different story. Just out of curiosity, have they recovered? And if so, how much would we be down if we still held it?
Well, some information we have there and some we don't. We don't know what their total drawdown of assets has been during the month of April. We'll likely get a glimpse of that in the next week ahead. Allianz did come out and announce that they were shutting down one of their strategies, the more aggressive strategy. This is not what SDCERS is invested in. It was called Structured Alpha 1000. And they are going through an orderly liquidation and will give all investors their assets back in that particular strategy. So that strategy will no longer exist. The strategy that you're invested in, the 500, again, I don't know the total extent of client redemptions. I believe they're significant. We do know that your investments returned during the month of April returned about 11%, so roughly in line with what a positive 11%, roughly in line with what the S&P 500 had done during that same time period. So it looks like they captured some of the beta during the month of April back into the portfolio.
So are you saying that they're not down any 70% right now? They're down maybe 20%? Or whatever.
No, I
with the S&P.
I believe their from peak to the time when you receive your money back on Monday, their total loss will be roughly 70%. And that would include.
I'm not understanding because we gave an order to sell a month ago. Or 3 weeks ago, I don't remember. And I'm asking if we hadn't sold, would we be getting more money back or not?
That's unknown. So you put in your order to liquidate on April 7th. They then queue all liquidations and give investors their money back. This is all per their terms of their contract in the first week of May. So you had exposure. You had their exposure to their investments from the point of your notification up until trading, I believe, as late as last Friday, or pardon me, as late as now. And those assets will clear and settle and be transferred to you on Monday. And
I see.
They did experience some of the market beta that the S&P experienced during the month of April, which is about a positive 12%. Okay.
So you're saying even with that positive beta, we're losing 70% of our investment?
That's correct. And, I'd like the benefit of having final reconciled numbers. At some point in time, we'll have that from the custodian after this next cycle. And so we'll have a better accounting, a more exact accounting of exactly what their performance was during this time period. But that's a rough estimate.
And Steve, do you have any idea or do you have any as to what the heck was going on? I mean, were these guys just playing cowboys, or were they just badly managed, or what do you think was going on there?
You know, I'm going to refrain from editorializing because there's just so much we don't know, and that's in part why we're continuing to assess and try to investigate and try to get access to facts. And I prefer to stick in that realm and share that with you all as soon as we have that information so that we can decide what the next right steps are.
Well, let me ask it differently. What did you learn from this experience that would guide us differently in future?
Well, I think I'm still learning that. So this is a strategy that, as Liza mentioned at the outset, that we've tracked for years. I think Liza's tracked it for years as well. We've had hundreds of hours of due diligence done on this manager, operational due diligence, investment due diligence, on-site meetings. I mentioned the reassessment of the strategy that we had done as recently as November. And we have done independent stress tests of their portfolio using our analytics and using third-party analytics as well. So it's a strategy we've known remarkably well, and that's why we're left scratching our heads. There's some things that we don't understand how they happened, how they unfolded the way that they did based upon our understanding of the strategy and the way that it operated. So we need to get those missing pieces of information to be able to have a good assessment of lessons learned. I wish I had a better answer for you.
Okay,
thanks, George. Let's move to Cliff, please.
Real quickly for background, Liza or others, do we have other investments with other parts of Allianz at the present time?
Yes, we do. We have a convertible bond strategy, which is managed by a team in the San Diego office. And we also have a managed futures allocation, which is managed by a separate team, I believe, out of New York.
Thank you for that background information. My question has to do with seems to be a pretty upsetting series of facts here about one of the largest asset management firms in the world, one of the most highly regarded investment management firms in the world. And I'd be very interested, especially from Steve and your colleagues, what assessment are you attempting to make about basic business practices where we have ongoing exposure? When a team fails to respond and provide information, when you've observed this type of performance and your conclusion is a systematic breakdown in the process as well as a failure of risk management, I would be concerned about our other investments with other parts of Allianz. And I'm curious if your colleagues in manager research have yet had the opportunity to talk with senior people at Allianz in the United States or in Germany about what happened here and what we might and others might expect from other parts of the firm, given this very serious set of facts that we're facing. It's one thing to have to suffer this serious loss, and that's spilt milk, but we have other monies there, and we have to be especially concerned, it seems to me, about the value that we are placing on those assets and the trust that we're placing in other parts of Allianz.
Cliff, your question's a very good one. Let me give you some thoughts around it. So the short answer is yes, that if there's a systemic problem with respect to communication with respect to disclosure of information and things of that nature, that would certainly change our views of any investment management organization. I'm not ready to say that that's the case yet, and the reason being is that Allianz has long operated in a kind of an unusual structure for an investment organization. They're very much a group of boutique organizations. So the team that manages futures is separate and distinct, has a separate and distinct P&L, separate and distinct investment thesis and investment beliefs and practices and protocols that's different from the convert strategy that you continue to have assets in. that is something that we've long appreciated, actually, about Allianz. And the questions have come from this committee in the past, from the board and the committee in the past, hey, do we have too much exposure to this one individual investment manager? And our thinking historically on that question has been no, because they are very distinct, very different operations. And again, they operate much like a boutique. I don't yet have a good answer to the question of that the communication and the openness to information. And I said previously that we've enjoyed tremendous access historically with this manager on all products, on all strategies, very open. I just think of the unusual circumstances and nature and the speed at which this particular product, the structured alpha product, essentially blew up, caused them to shift their dialogue and to go into more of a risk management mode. But it's certainly something that we need to better understand and get our arms around as it relates to the organization at large, and that's something that we will be doing.
Do you know what's happened to the staffers who worked on this strategy? Are they still employed?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. And again, I don't know. I don't know the withdrawal queue that was put in place for the product that you're invested in, or any of the others. We do know, because Allianz held a special client webinar, a conference call, that they were closing down the 1,000 strategy. But we don't know if there's been any changes of investment team. That's one of the key things that we do want to understand during this time period from right around February 20 through the end of March, what was going on with the team. Those are some questions that we have right now.
Well, I, for one, certainly look forward to your updates when you have additional background to share with us. But there's a lot to be learned about this situation. I hope we'll be able to discuss it in the fullness of time. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Are there any further questions?
I do. Steve, if I can ask a follow-up question, are we receiving appropriate communication on our other positions from the other Allianz managers, or are we in a similar position there?
I have not experienced any problems on your two other remaining assets. I asked the same question of Liza, if she and the team have experienced any problems.
No, we have not.
And have we taken any additional steps to verify their protocols and their reviews of those other products, or is it just sort of still in a queue on a timeline basis?
We haven't found. Well, that's a great question. We are still in contact regarding the other strategies, managed futures and the convert strategy. We haven't put them under review. We don't find that there's reason to do so based upon performance, based upon access to information, and so on and so forth. But as we learn more about what happened with structured alpha, that very well could lead us to re-underwrite those other strategies.
Steve, if I can suggest something, the fact that they didn't communicate with us, to me, suggests we probably need to do a review. Because if they didn't communicate with us on one strategy, I understand there's different managers, but I'll tell you what, I don't want to go back to our stakeholders and say we missed the opportunity to protect ourselves and to protect you a second time around. So I don't speak for the board, but for me, I don't know how we can face our stakeholders knowing that we had a vacuum of at least 2 to 4 weeks where these guys didn't communicate with us, and we didn't go and pull the sheets back on the other investments and dig deep into them.
Let us, you know what, I appreciate that. Let us do that. So Liza and team does have kind of freestanding communication protocols, reviews of investment managers. Let's follow that process, and let us at Aon follow a similar process to make sure that we still have access to the information that we need to be able to assess the manager, and we can report back to the investment committee on that.
Thank you. And my last question. Sorry.
Go ahead, Tadasi.
My last just comment was, and it was more just an understanding, it sounded like when I was listening to the returns that this thing was outperforming the benchmark by about 300 basis points over the, at the different intervals over the last 4 years, when the the portfolio sought to outperform the S&P 500 by 500 basis points. Were we ever concerned about that consistent, I don't want to say underperformance, but that consistent difference between what we were seeing in the return versus what the program was designed to return? And was there any? Did that generate any review? Should it have generated a review? I'm just curious.
Yeah, good question. It did generate some reviews, and let me think back. It was the fourth quarter. In fact, the last couple of trading weeks in the calendar year 2018, they had some pretty significant underperformance. I forget the exact number, but they underperformed by a meaningful amount, and that did trigger analysis on our part, additional reviews, additional discussions, et cetera, just to learn how they were operating in that environment. They then subsequently came back and had one of their better calendar years during the full calendar year of 2019. And through the end of that year, I think this is the number that Liza had mentioned, they had positive alpha of about 350 basis points.
Thank you.
Karina, is there another question from Karina?
Yes, a request. I'm wondering, Steve, in the interim, can we ensure that staff has access via client portals to risk reports on the other strategies that Allianz manages on our behalf, and also to conduct a review of the investment management agreements to ensure that we are being provided as a deliverable those reports on a periodic basis?
Karina, is that a general comment or request of Liza and team, or I'm not sure I followed?
Yeah, it's not necessarily intended to be a formal move, but I'm asking if you can ensure or report back that Liza's staff has access via like a client portal to risk reports as required, already in existence in our investment management agreement on the outstanding two strategies with Allianz, and then also, if not, to draft an amendment to the IMAs such that they are provided access to those reports on a periodic basis. So I'm trying to ensure that internal staff receives risk reports or has access to risk reports for the two strategies that Allianz continues to manage on behalf of SDCERS.
Got it. Yep, I think that's a very reasonable thing to do and a very reasonable thing to look into as well. I'll work with Liza in that regard.
Good point.
Right. Are there any further questions or discussion? I want to thank everybody for their questions, and I think it was helpful, and we have some, we'll look forward to additional deliverables from Aon and staff in this matter and regarding the other two investments as well. So if there is no further discussion, we're going to take action, and just to restate, and staff correct me if I'm wrong, under our investment policy statement, the CEO and CIO had the authority to make this decision because time was of the essence, and they did that after informing myself, Karina, and investment committee, and so now policy calls for the full board to ratify that decision. So that is what we're doing, and I would like a motion.
So moved. Karina Coleman.
Second, please.
Tom will second.
Tom Battaglia, okay. Right.
Tom, okay. Roll call, please.
Ms. Broad?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia?
Yes.
Mr. Hawquist?
Aye.
Mr. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Maggi?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Mr. Provolos,
Yes.
Ms. Spoon,
Yes.
Mr. Udries,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Mr. Shearson,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
and the motion passes 13-0.
Thank you. Excuse me. I have a cough, but I'm healthy. Okay, the next matter is an information item. Steve is going to continue with the floor and give us the Aon's current market update.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll give you just kind of some brief highlights. A lot has obviously happened since this investment committee and this full board were together on March 12th and 13th. The world has changed pretty dramatically. I'll give you a quick update on markets, talk briefly about your program and what we're seeing institutional investors doing more broadly, and also just talk about actions and activities associated with both your team and with Aon over the last couple of months. First, just markets in general. So the first quarter equities declined by roughly 21% after peaking around February 20th. In March alone, U.S. stocks were down 13.8%. The peak to trough in roughly 30 days' time was negative 34%. That is, I believe, the single quickest drop in the value of equities in modern financial time. So it's a 1 month period, 30 days, roughly 34% drop. The Federal Reserve actions and intervention actions has been pretty swift and very significant. On March 23rd, there was a comprehensive relief program in the tune of about $2.3 trillion to seek to support the U.S. economy. That's had a pretty profound impact. In April alone, U.S. stocks were up about 13.5%, bringing year-to-date performance for U.S. stocks down only 10.5%. We will be talking about some of the programs that the Federal Reserve announced. I believe there's committee and board meetings set up to talk about the TALF program and some opportunities that we see there, so stay tuned for that in the weeks ahead. Your program, on a fiscal year-to-date basis, this is an estimate. These aren't based on hard data yet, and this would include performance across your stock bonds portfolio and estimates for the private asset portfolio, but our estimate is down about 8.3% on a fiscal year-to-date basis. Just to give you some context, for full 12-month fiscal year 2009, your total fund was down about 19.1%. And so while this period that we've been in was swift and very negative, it has not been as negative as what we experienced during the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. There's been a lot of activity in your portfolio and a lot of activity in general. We have been recommending to clients to rebalance. We sent a communication out to clients, I believe it was in the early part of March to the mid part of March, recommending rebalancing. Your investment team rebalanced about $150 million, actually exactly $150 million, taking that out of indexed fixed income, placing those assets with Parametric. And just as a reminder, Parametric is the firm that helps you with what's called your overlay program, and they help ensure that you have exposure to stocks and bonds in the proportion that the board has approved. So that action in mid-March, on March 16th, helped you obtain policy exposure, which would have been advantageous as U.S. stocks and global stocks were up quite significantly during the month of April. So adherence to policy has been important, and doing it in the most cost-effective way is also important. And staff's decision to make that action and to use Parametric to do that was a very effective way to seek rebalancing. We've had a variety of client webinars that I believe your investment team and others have participated in. I mentioned some of the white papers that we've been issuing. We are looking for, quote, opportunistic investments. And these are things that we think would do quite well in this distressed environment that we're in right now. I mentioned the Troubled Asset Relief Program, part of the Federal Reserve's $2.3 trillion program. That is something that we will be talking about soon. We do believe that there's suitable investments that SDCERS could make to take some details. And then otherwise, it's been very much business as usual. There's a variety of different projects that we've been working on with your investment team that will come forward in July. We have some searches to do in small cap. We have a structure analysis to do. We will be looking at asset allocation and our cap market assumptions during the July meeting as well. So it's been a fairly busy time for your team. I'll stop there and be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Questions? Okay, I don't hear any questions. So thank you for those comments, Steve, and we look forward to speaking with you in July and getting a fuller picture of your view going forward and our asset allocation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just on their investment reports that you, I'm sure will want to look at, including items 3 and 4, which are some excellent reports by our investment staff about key person risk and return dispersion in private markets, and with generally favorable analysis relative to our risk position in those areas. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the agenda, and now it would be time for questions and comments from the president, board members, and staff. So I believe first what we're going to do is call the roll of the board and let each individual board member, if they choose, make their comments.
Okay, we'll start off
Correct?
with you, Ms. Broad.
Oh, okay, that's what I get for having a name that starts with B.
Yes.
I just want to say briefly, I'm looking forward to Greg's comments, but I appreciate all the communication we've received from the staff, or from Greg specifically, about how things have been going week to week. It's extremely challenging to run an organization like this with people largely not able to go to the office, and it's difficult for all the staff to adapt their systems and procedures and their home life to make this work. And so I just want to commend everybody for the excellent work they've done to keep things running smoothly. All the teams have been involved, member services, IT, investments, obviously, finance. So we want to thank everybody and look forward, hopefully, to getting back more to normal in the not-too-distant future.
Ms. Coleman?
I'll just take the opportunity to thank Carol Broad for her leadership and commitment and dedication. SDCERS has certainly benefited by her expertise, and I'm excited that she's going to be on for a second term. And also, I think it's a good time to recognize the incredible dedication of the staff. As Carol mentioned, I mean, these are extreme circumstances, and everybody seems to be getting business done as usual, which is no small task under the situation. So thank you to everyone.
Mr. Battaglia?
No comments or questions.
Mr. Hallquist?
First, I wanted to congratulate Carol on her re-election as president. Thank you for all the work you're doing, and I'm looking forward to working for you in this following year. Also, I just want to say thanks to Greg and the staff for, over the last couple of months, getting out information that we're able to get out to all the retirees to help them feel a little bit better and more comfortable with what's going on. And also, I do want to talk and thank Cynthia's staff for helping me personally. We had, the last week, 3 retired police officers passed away, 2 of whom were friends of mine. And with the shutdowns at the office, they needed some special help, which the staff was able to provide them, and I really appreciate that.
Mr. Kenny? We'll come back to Mr. Kenny. Mr. Maji?
Mr. Kenny, are you on mute? Okay.
I think I'm up, this is Lou. Congratulations, Carol, first of all, and thank you to all the staff there for helping keep the train on the tracks during this challenging time, to say the least. I guess I would pose this to Aon. I can appreciate your position, wanting to reserve comment until all the facts are in. totally understand that, but we do look forward to hearing what you guys find at the end of this. We're all concerned if there are blind spots, we do need to know about them. So look forward to hearing a little more on the issue from you. Thank you.
Mr. McBride.
I too would like to congratulate Carol, and then also a shout to staff. There were some members that were served very quickly by Cynthia and her staff. Just wanted to say thank you for all that work.
Mr. Provolos.
Yes, I have a couple of comments. First, I guess, to Steve, I want to thank you for coming today. I'm sure this was not your favorite meeting for the day. These are difficult circumstances. I've appreciated our partnership over the years with you. I understand that not only is this a professional issue, but I understand that you guys also invest alongside of your clients, including SDCERS, and if I understand correctly, you guys even had an investment in the same fund. So you guys are feeling it from two sides, both from us as a client and from you guys personally. Having said that, I also want to say I don't expect you guys to be perfect, but what I really want to make sure is that we are taking a deep dive into what happened, into why the issues are there, and what we can do in the future to be able to get the advance notice so that we can make these decisions more appropriately. So I appreciate you coming. I appreciate your answers. I'm looking forward to what you produce down the road. And for whatever it's worth, I don't expect you guys to be perfect, but I do expect that you guys will step up and help us with how to protect our stakeholders on a going forward basis. I also want to just say to Liza and her team, staff over there does a phenomenal job across the board, including you guys. But it's times like this when I when I can really appreciate more so what your team has done, because, man, this has got to be about the worst scenario for an investment team or committee to be in. I think you guys are doing a great job. I appreciate you guys not panicking. I appreciate you guys communicating well. And I appreciate you guys coming in every day and fighting the fight when it sucks. So thank you. Greg, I guess the only question I have for you is, and I'm sure you probably were going to comment on it, but for whatever it's worth, I haven't heard yet what we have done with our stakeholders, and I'm sure you're on top of it. I'm just curious to understand what we have done with our stakeholders, what communications we've given them, what they've asked of us, and what we can do to help them. And I'll conclude there.
Ms. Spoon.
Benassi, this is Liza. Oh. I would just like to make one additional comment. That in the coming year, one of the things that we would like to undertake is an audit of investment operations and processes. So that will be forthcoming. Thank you.
Ms. Spoon.
I think that's a great idea, Liza, and thank you for that.
I would like to join with the remainder of the board and congratulate you, Carol, on the excellent past year. Given all of the circumstances that have arisen, I understand that this has been a very challenging time for you to be president, and I thank you for agreeing to serve a second year in this environment. And I'd also like to thank the staff for continuing to serve the members in these challenging times. Ted and Sarah, both of you, thank you very much for getting the reports out on a timely basis. I know that this is a challenge with your staff and getting everything done with working at home, so thank you for that. And I'd like to also say how much I appreciate serving on this board with all of these very concerned and competent board members. I think the agency is just staffed very well from the staff side and the board side to survive these times. So thank you.
Mr. Udris.
Hey, everybody. Just wanted to congratulate Carol, express my support for the audit that Liza just mentioned. That's a very disappointing situation that we're dealing with, and I want to make sure we can take steps to not have anything like that happen again. And otherwise, just hope everyone is staying well it's a difficult time, and I'm just glad to hear everybody on the phone, and look forward to being with you guys at some point in the future in person.
Mr. Wallace.
Congratulations, Carol, and thank you for serve and doing such a great job. And I agree with many of the things that have been said, included that have been sent out. And I want to point out what a great job, and a thank you to Greg and Ted for submitting their FY21 budget this year. For those who are involved in the process, this year has been much more difficult and a lot of unknowns and in a shorter timeline, and they did a great job. So congratulations to the, I'll say, budget team. Thanks.
Mr. Shearson.
First, hello, everybody. I'm glad to know that everyone's doing well. I'm reminded of a quotation from Warren Buffett, I believe, who said something to the effect of, when the tide goes out, you can see who's been swimming without a suit on. And what we're seeing here today is everyone is fully clothed, that everyone is involved on staff, and our vendors, with one notable exception, is really doing the job that they were hired to do, and really rising to the occasion of all the various challenges and disruptions that we're all wrestling with. And I want to just congratulate everyone and note how much it is appreciated. We are responsible for supporting the lives of thousands of people through our operations, and now more than ever, it's so very, very necessary as we reach otherwise unprecedented levels of unemployment across our country. I want to highlight, in addition, the undoubtedly very challenging work done extraordinarily well by Liza and her staff, and by Carol and by Corinna in wrestling with this big challenge coming out of Allianz. A lot of work was done undoubtedly quietly and very rapidly, and I think we've done about as well as can be expected under these circumstances, and I, for one, want to acknowledge their work. I also have found that everyone on staff where I've had a question has been at the top of his or her game at every moment, and it's a little unsettling, and we're all getting used to our new normal for now, and changing habits is hard, and I think everyone's doing an outstanding job, so thank you to everybody.
Mr. Kaufman.
I just want to support comments I heard here today. Congratulations, Carol, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
And I want to go back to Mr. Kinney.
Yes, sorry, I was distracted before. I've got a plumber in the house that's shutting off all the water. In any case, I do want to also express my congratulations to Carol. Look forward to working with you over the next year. For me, it's a privilege to serve on this board, and I appreciate that. I also wanted to give Liza and her staff a message, and that is, this incident does not diminish my good opinion of you and your work. You did proper due diligence, and of course you're upset, but you don't have to wear it. So just, I don't know what you're thinking, but don't beat yourself up. Don't blame yourself. And lastly, I want to thank Steve also for his report, and I look forward to more color on, what actually happened and what can we learn from it. And then lastly, I just want you all to know that my prayers are for your health and safety for you and your families.
That's everyone, all the trustees.
Okay, great. Again, thanks everyone for your support and all those excellent comments. It's really great to hear from everybody. So next we will take comments from staff, and I believe Greg has comments for us.
Yes, thank you, Carol. First of all, I feel a little bit overwhelmed by all the supportive comments from the board. Thank you very much. I heard my name quite a bit, but please know that it is a team of 50 people, and we are all pulling together to take care of our members and to do the best we can under these difficult circumstances. And please rest assured, we are focused on our mission to deliver those benefits timely and accurately and take care of the trust. So, again, thank you for your support, and it's just a lot of fun to work together on this team, which most certainly goes straight to the top with this board. And along those lines, I'm really excited to work with Carol for another year in her capacity as president. Last year has been a lot of fun going through the trials and tribulations together and helping guide the organization forward. So thank you, Carol. Appreciate that. I wanted to say just a few words about our operations. As Carol mentioned, there is a more comprehensive report in your board materials, but it was kind of fun to think back on Friday the 13th marked our last meeting day, and it was also the very first day of thou shalt not gather restrictions. And as many of us have said, that the world has certainly changed a lot in the last 60 days. But importantly, since that day, SDCERS staff has successfully delivered both the March and April monthly retirement benefits to our retirees and beneficiaries on time and in a correct amount in these challenging operational times and financial conditions. And more importantly, we are going to continue to do that, pay benefits timely and accurately into the future. So we are in a good position, and we'll be taking care of what we need to do. But we did effectively change our service delivery model to accommodate the new federal, state, and local health rules and regulations with regards to shelter in place or safe at home, social distancing, all those taglines you hear today. But our individual counseling changed from in-person to over-the-phone counseling. Group counseling changed from in-person to webinars. And our communications changed from the call center to web-based requests. And importantly, I was very proud of our member services and benefits administration and legal teams as we immediately triaged our workload to ensure that we were taking care of our members with immediate needs and made sure that we were supporting them as well as we should. There was a very small amount of our members that decided just to retire immediately, and we were able to help them with those decisions and help affect those retirements. Over the last 60 days, we have got back more into a normal flow of business, and we are now counseling members who are thinking about retiring in the future. So we're helping people do more kind of planning in a reasonable time frame. At the same time we started immediately triaging work, we also triaged our own SDCERS staff's needs. We wanted to make sure that we were helping people with their needs, helping them take care of themselves, and actually providing them the tools so that they can continue working on behalf of the members that they serve. And we went effectively from 0 staff regularly teleworking to over 90% of our staff teleworking. And there's a huge shout out I have to give to Marcel Rossman and to David Bond and his team for actually putting together work plans and putting together tools in new creative ways to make sure that happened. With that said, we are still operating with the minimum amount of staff coming in physically to the office as possible, just to make sure that we honor those health restrictions and guidelines. One thing, I'm a silver lining kind of person, and I'm really very happy that we did not, we were able to avoid the anticipated staffing shortages. When this all started to unfold, there was a lot of consternation that there would be widespread illness and the fabric of our community would collapse. And I was concerned that we wouldn't have any workers to help our members. But fortunately, we've been a healthy team. We did have at least one member quarantined because of other family members working in the health industry, but no one with positive diagnosis. So we've been able to avoid employee illness, people unable to getting to work. So we've been doing well there. Looking forward, I would really like to help improve our member contact options. We firmly believe in the power of the internet, and that's a good choice for many for self-service. But with our constituent base, we also believe the power of personal contact is important. And while we can't do that in person at this point, we can certainly do it over the phone. And moving forward, we're taking steps to reopen our call center. And we're taking a two-pronged strategy. I'm very happy to report that the city of San Diego is implementing new remote call center tools. They've done it successfully for one department. And thank you, Dave Bond, for getting us next in line to be a small kind of beta site for using some remote call center tools. So really excited about that. We would also are entertaining as we lean back into relaxing social distancing and allowing some businesses to open up partially. Can we bring some of our call center staff back in-house in a safe manner? So we're also looking at that. So we really do want to improve our ability to reach out and talk with our members personally. Looking forward, we'd also like to improve our board support to include remote videoing. I'd like to really see how 60 days of not going to the barber or the beauty shop is doing to our board. So, I say that with jest, but...
No, I'm not sure you do.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, honestly.
I really do appreciate the board's patience in having today's telephonic call as opposed to a Zoom meeting or something of that nature. I believe we have a workable solution that is compatible with our board support platform. So we do have a special upcoming meeting of the investment committee Monday on May 18th at 9 a.m., which we will be trying to do a video teleconference with. So hopefully that goes very well. And we also have a planned remote video meeting for a special meeting of the board on Wednesday, May 20th, should there be action items coming out as recommendations from that investment committee meeting. So in summary about our COVID operations, I really would like to express my deep appreciation and admiration for the SDCERS staff, who really continue to look out for one another primarily as we move forward in helping take care of our members. There's a couple other items of interest. One, thank you, Tanasi, for the nice lead-in with regards to the Allianz notice. I did want to add in that we have been reaching out to all of our stakeholder groups to provide them information with regards to the portfolio and how it has been performing in this turbulent time, how we've been working with our investment experts, and how we've been actively overseeing and monitoring our various investment managers, and how deeply concerning it is for the one investment manager who is having all the extreme troubles that we've just been talking about. So we have talked with our employers, the city, the port, and the airport, with our retiree groups, and one of our represented groups, with regards to just letting them know how we're doing operationally and serving our members and how we're addressing this one issue. So they were very, very appreciative of the heads up, and they were very supportive of the Board of Administration for the good work that you do. I'd also like to appreciate Liza mentioning that, I think our current investment policies and procedures really helped us quickly identify and respond to the COVID-related impacts on the Allianz structured Alpha 500 strategy. But, there is always room for improvement. So SDCERS, will be using a independent fiduciary consultant to review and ensure our investment processes continue to be best practices. So I'll be working with our Chief Internal Auditor, Sarah Dixon, as we move forward in finding the best manner in which to do that moving forward. Also, with regards to Jeff mentioning that Ted and I and Marcel were in person and on the phone with the City Council presenting our budget, and the City Council was very appreciative of the organization's work and wanted to make sure that we thank the SDCERS and the SDCERS board for their good work in taking care of the program. On a different note,
I forgot you, Marcel. I apologize.
Yep. She was our secret weapon. She didn't have the opportunity to respond to questions, but she was ready, willing, and able. And so I want to thank her for that.
She wasn't on the cover page of the PowerPoint, so shame on you, Greg. I blame you.
On a second note, the California Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a notorious case in the pension industry called the Alameda case, where there's workers challenging the implementation of the 2013 pension reforms by the state of California for employees hired prior to 2013. It's a really interesting test case for the California rule addressing implied contract law. So the California Supreme Court heard oral arguments, and we're all sitting on the edge of our chairs waiting to hear what that decision means, because that could actually change how we do pension reform moving forward. Another item, I wanted to give a shout out to SDCERS, particularly the board. The city provided a report that 92% of Form 700 filers did so on time. But they gave special recognition to those departments and agencies that were 100% compliant, and that list included SDCERS. So thank you for the good press on that. I appreciate that. And I wanted to thank Johnny and his legal team, particularly Melanie Peters, for helping us all remember to be timely. So thank you for your help with that. And lastly, I wanted to highlight something very important in how we assist the city. In addition to running the benefits program, we also help the city facilitate their retiree health care program. And one of the things we do is there's an annual open enrollment that starts in June. And the enrollment books are at the printer and should be going out before enrollment starts. And Marcel had mentioned previously that it was a bit of a challenge because at the deadline, literally as the books were at the printer, we found out that there was going to be a change in the dental provider, which impacts about 1,100 of our retirees, and an additional non-Medicare provider provided through SDPBA. But I appreciate the staff for their flexibility and nimbleness and professionalism and just pivoting right away in a positive manner, getting the word out to the retiree groups, and also just changing our materials. So thank you very much. Regrettably, our thou shalt not gather and no social distancing restrictions mean that we can't have our big meetings in Balboa Park for our kickoff day or help day. But interestingly, we just found out that SDPBA has a new software tool that we can do kind of walk-up chat tables electronically. So we're going to try that for the very first time in early June, having a virtual event hosted by SDPBA that is going to include all of the insurance carriers, the retiree groups, and SDCERS. So things continue to evolve, and we find new ways to overcome our challenges on a daily basis, which makes work a lot of fun. With that, thank you, and this concludes my comments.
Well, thank you. That was a really great report, really great summary. And again, I know we're all really excited to observe how the staff, led by Greg, has managed through this difficult situation. So we're coming to the end of the meeting. I want to say I think this has been an excellent meeting. It's a telephonic meeting, but I think we managed to cover important information, difficult information. We had some great questions, some great ideas raised, and I want to just commend everybody involved for having such a great contribution. And so the next meeting is Friday, July 10th. I think it's likely to be a web-based video meeting. Stay tuned, and we'll let you know. We'll be doing some important things, including our annual asset allocation, as well as our periodic experience study by Chiron. And those are really important elements of our analysis for our managing our assets and paying our liabilities over time. And with that, if there is no other business, any other business, the meeting is adjourned. And that's my gavel.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Carol.
Bye, everyone.